Hello, my name is Kathryn Clark. So today we're talking about spirituality and what it is and the extent of it. And what we hope to do is widen the lens and scope for us so that we can see that spirituality actually impacts everyone in some way and is desirable for each one of us, and that it's not limited. You can't really put the spirit of God, the spirit of love, the spirit of lightness in a box. And there's no need for that kind of thing. So, anyway, I'll tell you a story. Now, I spoke to a young man. He seemed young to me, but he was probably about 35 at this stage. And he told me his story. And this was it. He went to Thailand on vacation with his friends, and they were super excited to be in this different country. It's so exotic, it's so unusual. And they were going over from Ireland, so it really was different from our little island here and how we live. Now, one of the things that they were exposed to there was a lot of drugs at a very inexpensive cost and no uh, seemingly little trouble with access. So they were drinking, let's call it partying. They were doing this at a high level. And he said, and I was always just that little bit more intense about the partying than my friends. He said there were some of them that could seem to be able to dabble. He said dabbling was a bit tougher for me. It was a sign that I didn't pick up on. I wish I had been, reflected back that way, that this is a little bit more intense for you. And that is really a sign of warning. So his friends went back and he stayed on in Thailand with a couple guys. And then later on, after a month or so, his couple friends went back. And he stayed on by himself. He had met some people there in a certain culture and he just stayed on. Now, he said it was about a year before he realized that he was addicted and that he was in trouble with drugs and alcohol. And he had put his family's best efforts off in the sense that they went out to see him, they expressed concern, they did everything they could to get him back. So then he cut contact with them because he said because I was full blown addicted. And when you're in that state, he explained to me, you have this denial piece is something you defend with your life because you don't want to quit. You don't no intention of it. And you make all kinds of complex reasons why you need to keep doing what you're doing or why you need to live a life that accommodates your addiction. Anyway, after a period of time, at some point, he realized this is actually tough because I'm getting sick and I'm feeling sick when I don't have the certain substances, and it's not fun anymore. And so he said, so I would resolve to quit maybe 4 times in one day. And he said, I'd be on my way to get drugs or to drink. And he said, and I'd be still telling myself, oh no, you're quit. You quit today. This is it. It's over. Even on the way, he said, it's magical thinking in the extreme. So he finally got so discouraged with himself. And he said he began to loathe himself. He hated himself because he wasn't quitting. In a sense, he kept making the decision and letting himself down. So really, it's like man versus himself. And but it's actually man versus the substance. So he said, "That's it. I'm a disgrace to my people. My family could never. I don't ever want them to see me in this condition. I'm going to take my life." Now, the whole time, the interesting piece that I found was he was in this dialogue with God all the time. And so he'd be talking to him, "Well, you're supposed to help me. I'm trying to do this, but I can't. And I guess you're just not going to help me." And he said, the way you blame externals as an addict is, he said, you wouldn't even believe it if I told you. You can find anything to blame, but but yourself or your choices. So he's in this communication with God all the time, hostile though it may be on his part. Or he said, like he said, no, it's beyond immature. It was just tantruming. It sounded like tantruming to me when he described it. So he says, I'm going to take my life. So he gets a rope and he goes to this place on the outskirts of a town. and goes into a barn and throws the rope over. And he said, "Well, God, here I am. This is where we are, and you haven't stopped me. And I have asked you and asked you and asked you. And you just ignore me. You just don't seem to care that I'm about to kill myself. But just get ready because here I come." Now, the guy did not have a faith problem, he had a substance problem. And I think that faith that he had was powerful. So, long story short, after warning God that this is where they had got to together because God had failed him so badly, he jumps and the beam breaks and he falls to the ground from a height and he breaks his ankle. Otherwise, he's fine. But now he's in far away where no one can find him and he has a broken ankle. And he said, "When I tell you it hurt, I was screaming in pain." And he said, "And who was I screaming at? God." He said, "I said to him, 'This is killing me. You didn't have to break my ankle. All you had to do was say stop and I would have stopped, but you just ignore me. He tantrumed and raged at God with the pain of it." And he said, "I literally could not believe that God allowed me to break my ankle, it turns out, in 3 places, and just didn't stop me." He said, "That's how messed up my thinking was." He said, "Looking back clearly, I was like a child." And he said, "And not everyone is as lucky as me or as blessed as me or as," he said, "I like to think as needed as me. Like I was needed for a purpose." But he said, I didn't miss the fact that God had saved my life, even in my fury and my agony of the." So he had his phone with him. So he called his family from the floor and said, "Don't trust me. Come and take me home and put me in a rehab. Don't believe anything I say if I object. Just come and take me home. Get me out of here. And call this friend of mine and tell him I can't walk. I'm on the floor of this thing. Someone come and help me." So his family was delighted. And they went and got him and they brought him home and he went into a rehab. Through the grace of God, he recovered there and he stayed. And he's been working with young male addicts ever since. And he said, "Do I mind that I'm kind of giving my life to this?" He said, "It's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. I found my life in addiction instead of lost my life in addiction." And he said, "For that, I am eternally grateful to God. This is my life." He said, "Now, here's the difference in my life then and now." He said, "Then I was living in the dark. And you can't turn the lights on because you see what you will not see. So the dark is cozy and suffocating, yes, but you don't have to see the hard things." And he said, "Now I live in the light and I'm afraid of nothing. I can look at any reality right in the eye and take it in." And he said, "I see these young men come in or boys," and he said, "and my heart breaks for everyone. And I think, okay, let's go. Let me start. Let me start the work that's needed for him to take it in that this is not his friend, this relationship is killing him, and that there are beautiful relationships out there for him." Well, as you cannot believe, I was enthralled with that back and forth with God, and he never left relationship. He never left relationship with God at his ugliest. He seemed to be absolutely confident that God was there and that God loved him. And he said, I would say to God, "Oh, I'm sure you think I'm the world's biggest loser. Oh, I'm sure you're really mad now. Okay, well, if you just help me, we'd be fine, but you won't." So he's projecting that out. He wasn't helping himself. Clearly, God was remaining with him. My friends, why am I saying this? There's this piece that you've heard me talk about people thinking, well, I want to be in a relationship with God, but I don't have my ducks in a row. And until I organize myself and end this bad relationship or stop partying quite so much or go back to school or apply for an annulment because I'm divorced or whatever it is, we have this list of imaginary obstacles in our head. And we think, I can't really talk to God again until I overcome some of these things. I'm doing the wrong stuff. And so, you know, I need to get those things sorted out. Then sometimes the wrong stuff or things that we're doing can become a lifestyle. And what we do unconsciously is assume, well, clearly God doesn't want any part of this lifestyle. And I'm not talking about sex in case anyone's thinking, oh, she's talking about sex. I'm not. I'm talking about the whole thing. You know, the compromise with the truth. The compromises we make with the truth to our families, to ourselves. Every time we do, we lose a little bit of our dignity. We surrender a little bit of our self-respect. And and then slowly, gradually, you decide, well, self-respect isn't really necessary for me. I'm really not worthy of it. So I'll stop craving it. And again, that's not living in the light because the light would tell you, yeah, you're making mistakes. Well, you're also learning and you're deciding and you're choosing. And if you've ever, I'm not a shopper, I'm not a big shopper, but I mean, some people would go to a clothes store and they would try on, I don't know, like 25 dresses, and they might leave without buying one. They still don't know. And that's what you're probably doing. That's what a lot of us are doing while we're figuring our lives out. We're trying on dresses, or if you're a man, you're trying on suits, or we're actually trying on identities. That is appropriate at certain ages. So, in a sense, I get a laugh out of the concept in Catholicism of this is who we are, this is what you do. Full stop, final. If you deviate from one of these teachings as I've presented them to you, well, then you're out and you're not a Catholic. It's crazy. Like the Navajo Indians had this wonderful spirituality, and have no desire to become a Navajo spiritual person. What I'm saying is the way they did it was called the good life or right living. It was something like that. I read a fabulous book and it included a lot of this Navajo spirituality. But the intriguing part for me was the way this Navajo Indian had um, absorbed it and how it informed how the choices he made, how he lived his life, how he related to other people. Our Christian spirituality is really meant to be user friendly. Catholicism is intended to be user friendly. It was started by Christ. Now, the New Testament, if you're doing nothing else, take one of like Mark or Luke or John, take one of the Gospels and just sit down and read it. Learn about Jesus because everyone loved him, everyone wanted to be with him. He didn't blast on about the rules, he blasted on about his Father's love. He represented his Father with such consistency and purity. And he loved. Now, the things that struck the writers of the Gospels the most forcefully seem to be the way that Christ was so countercultural. Well, in our Catholic faith, we need to be countercultural sometimes because the focus on the sins, mortal or venial, this and that, excluding people from reception of the Eucharist because we decide they're in a state of mortal sin, I don't think it would have flown with Christ. I don't think it would have flown with him. I think he would say, um, how many times did I say in the New Testament that I was the judge? My Father had given me the task of all judgment. It's not unclear. And yet we seem to have developed into a religion that prompts people to think if they don't have their ducks in a row, there's no place for them in our family. Someone said to me once, It seems like you're angry about that. I said, well, my problem is this. I don't understand why everyone isn't angry about a distortion of Christ that prompts people to think they're not welcome to receive him. These are Catholics. They go to Mass every Sunday. They love God. Even if they don't go to Mass every Sunday, they love God. They know where home is. And yet they can be told, no, for the reason I'm telling you, you can't receive communion. We're assuming you're in a state of mortal sin. It's a heck of an assumption to make about another person when you've been told you can't judge. And I don't care who you are. The Pope, I think Francis's pontificate will go down in history for the one phrase, who am I to judge? And everyone jumped all over him. You're the Pope. You have to judge. But see, he refused to get caught up in that trap. He just wouldn't take it on. He's like, nope, I'm not judging because I too am going to face my maker. And I am not going up there saying that I judged and condemned God's children, whose full story I couldn't know possibly. Back to the Navajo spirituality. What I liked about it is obviously the simplicity. And I extend Catholic simplicity to you today. Now, am I saying there is no sin? Clearly, you know that's not what I'm saying. Am I saying that you shouldn't follow our teachings? I personally do. I love our teachings. I think they are like the bumpers in life. It's like the Navajo right thinking or good living. Ours are our Catholic teachings. They're absolutely beautiful. And we all understand the reason for teachings at all is because you're going to get into some difficulties and you'll need some road signs. The reason for the teachings isn't to tell you why you're going to hell or that if you break teachings, you're going to hell. It's not that that kind of oversimplification without distinction is the enemy of our church because people run away. They don't walk away. They run away with anger because they're so badly hurt. They're so, you know, when you talk to some people about this, they just get it. It resonates. And they say, yeah, I never was comfortable with that. I mean, really, if you're an adult looking for religions, who's going to join a religion that says these people and these people are in a state of mortal sin and we say so? And for them to get out of that state of mortal sin, they have to go through us. And we'll decide whether or not to release them from their state of mortal sin. Again, I could make a lot of distinctions, but trust me that I have done this work. Which one of us Christians who love Christ would think that was the good religion to join? It's not for me. I don't like that kind of, I mean, I started as a Franciscan in my journey as an adult, and our emphasis was on simplicity and joy. And that fit with me. And that hopefully fits with you. Maybe that appeals to you too. Well, in our apostolate, the apostolate of the returning king, we've incorporated a lot of that simplicity and joy. Now, why should you care? If you don't like religion and you're not sure about God's existence, why should you care what I'm saying? Let me explain. This guy who was in such despair that he jumped and broke his ankle in 3 places said, the only real way to happiness is by helping other people, by not thinking about yourself, by not becoming so self absorbed that the pain or the anguish or the plight of other people is irrelevant to you. You don't even see them, you look right past them. He said, that's suffering. That is suffering. He said, serving other people, relieving their burdens, you don't even think about yourself. You don't even think. He said, I knew another story, a woman who gets into her 30s, very successful professionally, thought about getting married, decided not to a couple times, ends up adopting a baby. And now this was someone who never did, she had all her clothes dry cleaned. She was a professional who had the money, tons of them, and she could buy whatever she wanted. And she had the baby. And I mean, to say that she dropped into motherhood like it had always been there for her. And I said one day to her, this must be brutal on you because, you're up during the nights, you're working so hard on the connection. What's it called? What am I thinking? What do we teach it? The bond, but the attachment theory. So when they adopted these kids, I noticed. I know a lot of people have adopted from China at that time, and they had to really work on the attachment. It wasn't like it didn't start at the very first day, and things happened prior to them receiving this child, these beautiful gifts. And so she was working hard on that, up not getting a lot of sleep, etc. I said, this must be really tough for you. And the reason I was thinking was because she was a single mother, and it was extra difficult, if you will, or was taking extra work. She said, startled, are you crazy? She said, do you know what a relief it is not to have to think about yourself? She said, getting this child has given me permission to not think about myself at all. And she said, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. I've never been happier, never been happy like this. I'm offering you this because I'm giving another clue. If you want to be happy, you would incorporate some kind of expansion of your heart in a time when, like the phone, really, that tech, it does so many wonderful things. And frankly, I'm a fan. I love it. I love it. I use it for all the wonderful things. But it's a real easy way to numb the part of you that craves connection. And if you are numbing, it means you're not feeling. And if you're not feeling, it means you're not loving. And if you're not giving love, the odds are you're not receiving a heck of a lot of it back. And what's happening inside? What's your little spirit doing? Well, it's not being watered. You're not feeling the love. You're not giving the love. We were built to love and be loved, as the book says. You need love, and God loves you. So if you say, well, I'm not very lovable, no problem. That guy was hardly lovable by the time he ended up in such bad addiction that he chose to end his life. But God always loved him. And he never stopped talking to God. So I think that's a good strategy for all of us. No matter what's happening, tell God about it. If you're like a 3-year-old child kicking a chair, no problem. God can handle that. Blaming God for his addiction, telling God off, going to take his life, and he's giving it to him good. It's just your fault. You know, I've been asking for help. You have refused to help me. And anyway, I mean, it was comical. And he thought it was comical from the vantage point of being in the light. He thought it was comical. So, my friends, I would say if there's any part of you that doesn't like yourself, be alert. Self dislike, self hatred, self loathing is a trick. It's just not for you. It comes from like letting in someone's thoughts about you and thinking that somehow that explains you to you. But nobody explains you to you but you plus God, you plus the light, you plus the spirit, however you want to think of it. So I think if you want to become holy, it can happen very fast. Now, why do you want to become holy? Just insert, let's just take the two words holy and happy and use them interchangeably. If you're holy, you're really happy because you don't care what anyone thinks of you. You're living in freedom. It's easy to make you laugh. It's easy for you to make other people laugh. Your spirit is light. You're light. You're buoyant. I know I'm loved, and I'm going to do right by anyone around me. So, an antidote for self dislike or loathing is service. Let it go. You don't have to think about it. You don't even have to think about yourself at all. You have to feed yourself. You have to reflect on your life, sure. But at some point, when you start thinking about other people, it's like a relief valve, like a pressure cooker. opens up and it gets all that steam out because it can get sticky in there in our minds if all we're thinking about is ourselves. It can get real, they call it navel gazing. I don't like that term. I'm not sure why. But I think if you're self absorbed, what you actually are is worried sick that there's something wrong with you. And while you may not be acknowledging that to yourself, I think you know. I think at some level you're afraid there's something wrong with you. So you just keep thinking about yourself, how you look, what you're wearing. And it's in a sense, it's not the road. It's not the path to happiness. It won't ever make you happy. So what I would say is just pray in some way, help me, show me, know me, help me to know you. Um, and do one thing and combine it with God. So this is how you're going to become a saint, like, right away, overnight. And this is all in the moments. We live in the moments. We don't live in yesterday. We don't live in tomorrow. We live right now. So right now in your day, pick something that you are going to do for God, with God, because you think it might be something that God might like you to do. Now, I'm telling you, this is so funny. Already, you'll know. And the fact that you know what matches God and what doesn't tells us you know God on some level. And it's written on the human heart anyway. So it's there, it's in you. I really don't have to explain it much more. So think to yourself, okay, I'm going to do something that's a sacrifice for another person. It could be something that doesn't cost me much. Maybe it's 5 minutes. Maybe it's something you're not going to say instead of something you would want to say. And maybe you say, you know what? I'm going to do this with you, God. Be like that young man. Talk to God through it all. I'm going to do this with you, God. I'm going to not say this thing that's true, but I'm going to give the person a free pass. And I'm not going to say it. I'm doing this for you, God, because I know you love this other person too. And I want to do something good. And this, it would seem to me, is a nice thing, a holy thing, a truthful thing to do. And then tell God about it. See what comes back to you. See how God feels about it. Well, how do I know how God feels about it? You're saying God doesn't talk to me. But see, he communicates with you. This is why we're doing your spiritual and mystical senses. This is why this is part of learning how God talks to you, what God wants for you, what God hopes for you. He wants most of all for you to be safe and content. He wants you to know him so that you can love yourself as he loves you. When you love yourself, you really start making different choices. Okay, my friends, so that's the exercise. One act of service, one act of honesty. I heard this book by, I forget his name. But anyway, what he was talking about was how often people lie. And people lie this much and they lie this much and then they lie this much to family and this much to this. And I thought, he sure isn't talking about how often people lie to themselves because that would take real sleeves rolled up. And that is relevant. That is actually relevant instead of going around negatively scrutinizing everybody's defended positions and their desire to survive relationships by some truths and some untruths. It's pretty um pretty negative light stuff. Now, what was the point? Okay, so if that's true, and I would doubt some of it, but if it's true that we all tell fibs here, there, and everywhere, um, catch yourself and say, all right, I would normally just say this, but you know what? I'm going to do an exercise, God. I'm going to tell the truth here. And, what's happening if you do this? Well, you're hauling light into your mind and your heart and your relationships. You're hauling light. Now, well, if I say that, the other person's not going to like it. Well, don't be foolish. Don't say anything that's going to hurt someone. But, just one moment in your life where you would be inclined. Every time we tell an untruth, we're kind of going into the dark, aren't we? We're kind of like dimming. It's like a light dimmer. We're dimming our ability to see the sharp corners in our life. Like that man said, I was totally in the dark. I didn't see anything I didn't want to see. I refused the light. So I'm just saying, let's turn up the light like a dimmer switch. Turn up the light a little more in your life and do that through honesty and practice honesty by saying one right thing to yourself, to someone else. Like you might say, yeah, I'm just going to do this. And in your head, what you're really planning is to stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning and watch a show. Okay. Well, why not be honest with yourself? Why are you faking? Why are you pretending? You're not doing the right thing. You're planning on doing the wrong thing. So tell yourself that. I'm just going to say, who cares? I'm going to haul myself into work exhausted. Um, and be cranky all day because I'm somehow giving this to myself. That's honesty with yourself, which I think is really, really kind of priority. So you can take honesty, you can take service, whatever, but do it joyfully because this is you having fun with it. You're playing with the next life, with the divine life. And the divine life wants you to connect and play with them. And let's say God, especially. So give it a try. Try something nice. You're doing it as a decision to connect with God. You're doing it with God, imperfectly chatting away to God about it. This is why I'm doing it. Now you're going to say, oh, why are you only doing it today? You should do it all the time. Oh, I'm not doing it all the time. I'm just doing it today. Whatever. Free conversation. God does know everything and he loves you infinitely. He's the one you need to be in communication with. All right. There we go. God bless you. I love you. We all love you here. Bye bye.